Souvenir programs here. As you know, most of the autograph shows on Held by Legends, Signed by Heroes are of me profiling a baseball player. This show is a little bit different. Yes, he played in the majors, but the two autographs I'm showing today are from his basketball days at Cal Berkeley when he was a Bear Cager. This sports star is a local legend in the community and has been for decades. And tonight is a birthday party for the guy they call Robbie. But the invites his mom sent out say Earl because his name is Earl John Robinson, nicknamed Robbie. Local writers called him the Earl of Berkeley, and he was born on this day, November 3rd, 1936, and made his MLB debut in 1958 right out of college. Born in Louisiana but raised in Berkeley, California, and Earl was only a child when his dad died, sometime during World War II, and this was something he would never talk about. Growing up, Earl lived across the street from a park, and the guy they call Robbie was known to be a sensitive boy, sticking up for the little kids at the rougher parks and playgrounds that he would venture to. Earl was not just street smart, but very, as they say, cerebral, and when words or reasoning didn't work, he would have no problem taking a few minutes to bully the bullies. So he did. In a way, getting a head start on public speaking, coaching, and teaching the youth, something he would do for the rest of his life. One instance of Earl being quick to interject himself into a situation was when some of the kids were playing around at the park, and one started asking Earl's Japanese friend, Pete Demoto, about life in a World War II internment camp. Earl spoke up saying Pete doesn't have to talk about it if he doesn't want to. A very sensitive issue for Japanese Americans, especially with the war not too far in the rearview mirror, and like many Japanese families, Pete Demoto's families were Americans that have lived in California for generations. From that day on, the two formed a bond for life, with Pete saying he spent more time at Earl's house than his own. Pete was a year younger and played football with Earl in high school, with the two meeting up again as Cal Bear classmates. Pete Demoto tells one story about Earl pushing the high school track coach into the swimming pool after he heard the coach say something that Earl considered to be racist. Pete said, Robbie was ahead of his time. Most of us were not going to challenge authority in that way. When Pete says most of us, he means young minorities. And yes, Earl was suspended. But he'd probably do it again. While at Berkeley High, Earl was a star in all three sports, playing defensive end on the football team, but hurt his knee and was told by his baseball coach to give it up and concentrate on the other sports he excelled at, baseball and basketball. So he did. And he was either all-league or all-county every year. A very smart student in all areas, Earl would participate in student government, and then in the fall of 1954 would attend his hometown university, Cal at Berkeley, on an academic scholarship, majoring in speech, graduating with a doctorate in education. Earl played basketball and baseball for Cal and was an instant standout in both. As captain of the Bears basketball team, he was twice an All-Coast selection, 3 times named to the All-Pacific Coast Conference team, and would lead Cal to 3 straight conference titles, 1956, 57, 58. And these are some of the programs from those games. And the guy they call Robbie took his team to the 1958 NCAA Regional Finals, where the Bears would lose to Elgin Baylor's Seattle Chieftains. And when the season was over, Earl was voted the team's most inspirational player and is still one of the school's all-time leading scorers. Cal's basketball coach, Hall of Famer Pete Newell, called Earl Robinson one of the finest natural athletes I have ever seen and one of the most coachable youngsters I have ever had. My dad and grandpa were big basketball fans and followed a variety of college teams during the 1950s, traveling to quite a few colleges around the San Francisco Bay Area, attending many games and getting dozens of autographs, including Earl Robinson and the Cal Bear team, who were at this game as spectators when they signed this program I will show you. As good as he was in basketball, he was just as good in baseball, hitting .460 on the Cal Bears freshman squad that went undefeated, impressing Washington Senators manager Chuck Dressen, who called Earl the best young physical specimen playing baseball I have seen out here in the West. It's Earl right there. His junior year, he played shortstop, batted .352, was named All-American, and led his 1957 Cal Bears team to an NCAA College National Championship, beating Penn State in the College World Series for Cal's second title, with the first years earlier with the great Jackie Jensen leading the way. Earl was now considered a can't-miss prospect, with all 16 Major League scouts taking a hard look, with the Cardinals putting out a $60,000 offer. A big decision for a young man. Stay in school or take the money and play pro baseball. Not taking the situation lightly, Earl got a hold of Jackie Robinson as well as Sammy Davis Jr. to ask their advice. Both black icons reminded Earl why he was going to school and what his goals had been all along, to get a UC degree. So he did. Lucky for Cal Bear fans, Earl stayed at Cal and got that degree, giving those fans another year to watch Earl play ball. Not afraid to ask for advice and was quick to answer yours, but had no time for games, unless it was the game at hand. A no-nonsense guy, Earl Robinson would not take it. Talking about racial slurs, that is. His Bear teammate Bob Dalton remembers a baseball game against USC and said this: "They were yelling some really ugly things at him while we were doing our fielding drills before the game, so he started firing balls into their dugout. Robbie didn't hear another word the rest of the game." That's probably because Earl was a pretty big dude, and I can only imagine those balls he was throwing into the Trojan dugout were coming in pretty fast and hard. The guy they call Robbie stood 6'1", weighing in at around 190 pounds or so, depending upon how active he was with the ladies that week. You see, Earl was a real cool cat and always a smooth talker, and this was years before he became a speech professor. Earl had a reputation around town as a very sharp dresser, with basketball teammate Joe Cap saying, "Robbie had 2 bedrooms, one for him and one for his clothes." Joe Cap. Speaking of Joe Cap, a.k.a. Nutty Joe, a.k.a. the toughest Chicano, he was the third minority in this circle of California friends that included Pete and Earl. So here's an example of a team player with school spirit. Earl Robinson spent the 1957 football season as a yell leader on the cheer squad. Yep, he was a rah-rah boy. This was at the request of Cal's quarterback Joe Cap, who asked Earl to be a yell leader, telling him how at some of the home games the frat boys would get a little drunk and by the fourth quarter would get a little wild and sometimes out of hand. Not a good look for any university. Joe, having known Earl for a while, knew his basketball teammate had what it takes and could probably control a section of 5,000 plus rowdy college kids with Earl's words and his actions. So he did. Joe Cap would have done this himself if he wasn't busy playing in the game along with his left guard and co-captain Pete D'Amoto. But really, that's a lot of pressure Joe put on his friend, a young black man at a pretty much all-white college. Earl is listed in this 1957 big game program, but he's not in the Yell Boy photo. I'm thinking he didn't want to do those silly poses you see the Stanford Yale team doing, with Earl knowing that photo would be seen for all time. 70 years later, and I'm still talking about it. And you know me, I would have made a point to show him in those goofy poses. Not so much to razz him, but to show how Earl was a team player with school spirit and not embarrassed to be a Yale boy. Though it seems Earl drew the line when it came to being in the Yale team photo. Completely understandable. But Earl did more than just jump and shout and keep frat boys in line. He was a 2-sport superstar, and it would have been 3 if being a yell leader counted as a sport. It doesn't. Besides leaving his mark in NCAA basketball, pro baseball was the other sport where Earl made a name for himself, and was the sport that put him on a baseball card and in the MLB record books as the first black player to receive a signing bonus in Major League history. Black players were always offered less money than white players, so Earl sought out Cal Berkeley law professor Adrian Cragen to negotiate his contract, resulting in a $60,000 bonus, a 3-year MLB pact that had a graduating pay rate starting at $7,000 and would go to $10,000 in the 3rd year. More than a decade after Jackie Robinson broke MLB's color barrier, Earl Robinson became the first black player to receive a bonus contract. The Pittsburgh Pirates made a few visits to Earl's mom's house, but the Dodgers had the inside line because one of their scouts, Bill Brenzel, played in the PCL with Cal's coach back in the 30s, and his son was teammates with Earl in high school, and Bill had been bird-dogging Earl for years and advised him to sign with the Dodgers. So he did. In 1958, with the brand new LA Dodgers as a third baseman, but he could play any position. Too bad for Earl, none of those positions were in LA, and he spent most of the season back east up in Montreal with Dodgers AAA affiliate, the Royals, where he was teammates with a couple of future managers, Sparky Anderson and Tommy Lasorda, and another Tommy, a young Tommy Davis. Earl would make his MLB debut as a LA Dodger at the end of the 1958 season. But the next 2 years were spent in the minors, and after the 1960 season, he was sold to the Baltimore Orioles. So Earl would leave California and head to spring training camp in Miami, a city that allowed blacks to stay in any hotel they wanted to. But Earl chose to stay in an all-black hotel, where he said he felt more comfortable. So he did. The only other black player at that camp, Mickey McGuire, followed suit, and the two would catch flack from civil rights activists for doing this. Earl would make the club, sharing right field duties with Whitey Herzog for 1961, but would lose that spot in 1962 with a hurt elbow and hardly played. And it's at this time Earl declines to have elbow surgery, a decision he said he later regretted, spending the next 2 years in AAA before being called back up by the Orioles in 1964 for his last look at the big leagues. The guy they call Robbie would finish up his pro career in 1965 playing AAA ball for the Cubs. Between 1958 and 1965, Earl played 4 seasons of Major League Ball, mostly with the Orioles. He hit 12 big league home runs and had 57 in the minors, playing in over 700 games for teams like the Green Bay Blue Jays, Montreal Royals, Rochester Red Wings, Spokane Indians, St. Paul Saints, and the Salt Lake City Bees, a few team name drops. After his days of playing pro baseball were over, Earl went back to Cal to coach basketball for a few years, and in 1966 was hired as head coach of Merritt College, making Earl the first black basketball head coach at a California junior college. He would go on to coach basketball at a couple of colleges, including Laney College, where Mr. Robinson, as he was called, put his doctorate of education to use at high schools and colleges around Oakland, spending decades as a speech and communications professor. One of Earl's college students for several weeks was another local hero, this one from Oakland, named Rickey Henderson. Earl helped the 50-year-old college student write and prepare for his MLB Hall of Fame induction speech. 1988 was the year Earl Robinson was inducted into the Cal Bears Athletic Hall of Fame, and in 2010 was selected to the Pac-10 Basketball Hall of Honor. The following year, Earl received the Pete Newell Career Achievement Award, presented to Cal alumnus who uphold the highest ideals of Coach Newell and the school. Earl graciously accepted the Newell Award, and while standing on the Haas Pavilion court that he played on some 50 years prior, said this: "I am humbled by this award. You, the fans, supported us. I don't care whether Wilt Chamberlain came in here, the great Bill Russell, Casey Jones, Elgin Baylor, or whoever it might be. It was your support that made us feel that we could always compete. And so I accept this award in your honor." After baseball, Earl didn't sit around the house reading the paper and mow the lawn once a week. Nope. Besides his day job, he kept busy by helping his community. He was director of special projects for the Oakland A's in the 1980s, vice president for the board of trustees for the Oakland Zoo, and spent 3 years on the board of directors for the California Alumni Association. Don't want to get too personal, but here we go. Earl was one of those guys who persevered in school, sports, and marriages. Even after 4 tries at marriage, Earl continued the pursuit of happiness and found it in his 5th marriage. Sometimes you pick a chocolate from the box, only later to find out it's not your favorite. So you continue the search for that one with the creamy center, but you keep picking the coconut. Some get tired of chocolate and move on. Others keep picking the ones filled with coconut. You don't know until you have a little taste. Like Forrest Gump said, life is like a box of TV remotes. You never know what you're going to get. You might pull out a Zenith or a Magnavox when you're looking for the Sony. Kind of like your favorite singer. You never really know who's a good person or not till later when it's all said and done and it's too late. So be careful what musical artist you pick for the song at your funeral. The one Earl chose was from a R&B singer who's in prison doing 20 years. Nice song though. Earl was in poor health after suffering several heart attacks requiring a prolonged hospitalization followed by very expensive hospice care. When insurance coverage ran out, he would pay out of pocket, until groups of people came to help out financially, like Dodger owner Peter O'Malley, Major League Baseball's assistance team, and his former Cal Bear teammates covered the cost of his care, all arranged by his childhood pal, Pete D'Amoto. In his final days, as time was winding down, they say Earl enjoyed all the visits he got from his friends and former teammates that made it a point to stop by the hospice facility to pay their regards to the guy they call Robbie. There are no real good days to die. And nobody wants to pass away on Christmas or Easter or at a birthday party. But if you think about it, the 4th of July would be a good day to die. Every year, fireworks in the air, happy people celebrating. That's how it turned out for Earl when he passed away in 2014 on the 4th of July. Earl was philosophical about death in his final days, saying, "I'm not sad. I know I'm impacted by the grace of God. So if I have a day, a week, or a month, I should be thankful about that. My doctors have been straight up with me. I'm probably dying. I'm not ready to give it up yet. But when I do, I'm cool with that." I almost ended the show with that quote because I liked it. But instead, me and the man of the moment, the birthday boy, the guy they all called Robbie, will leave you with one of his MLB stories, a great story that is relevant today, not just because the Yankees were in the World Series, but it involves the tying of a famous Yankee home run record. So Earl was playing right field for the Baltimore Orioles when they visited Yankee Stadium on September 26, 1961. It was a Tuesday night, a special night in baseball history that was witnessed by over 19,000 Yankee fans. It was a nice night for Earl at the plate, facing Yankee starter Bud Daly. He hit a single, double, and scored a run. But it was Roger Maris who was the man of the moment on that night when in the third inning he tied Babe Ruth's single-season home run record by clobbering his 60th home run into deep right field, way up into Yankee Stadium's upper deck. Earl watched as the ball sailed over his head and came down in the upper deck and then bounced around like it was in a pachinko machine. Earl didn't take his eyes off that ball, and to his surprise, the ball ended up back on the field. So Earl went over and picked it up, later saying, "When the ball came back on the field, I said, I'm going to keep this sucker." 40 years later, while preparing for the movie 61, director Billy Crystal gave Earl a phone call asking him about that day. Earl continues, "When I tried to pocket the ball, the umpire said, 'Robinson, give me the damn ball before I toss you from the game.' So I did.